Hello, welcome to the March 10th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of the software that you're using. So if it's Cubase, for instance, if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which version numbers, if it's 13, 14, or 15, and the operating system, that information is helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to ask questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't get an immediate response to the question, we will get to it. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. We should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think we're almost in the high 43,000. You might cross 44,000 this week. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent Decay. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience, so we'll express our thanks to them. We'll also give an extra round of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. And once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I'm based in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so you see Jazz Dude posting a link to why Cubase has the best mixer of any DAW, as well as an Absolute 7 Groove Agent tutorial. We see Rick Ballantyne from Whittier, California. Says, I have an early question. How would you suggest setting up Cubase to be able at the same time to work in 2.1, 5.1, Atmos, and bounce back and forth? So generally what my friends that are kind of, mixing for different formats would always, I'm thinking of Chuck Ainlay, who's been a guest on our Zoom social meetups. Generally, what the typical workflow is to get a stereo mix done. 2.1 really isn't a format per se, so you'll have a stereo mix. You may have a subwoofer that's part of your monitoring environment, but it's not going to be a separate channel. Then you have 5.1. So once you have built the stereo mix, then you can build the 5.1. And 5.1 is going to be, actual discrete channels. And then after a 5.1 mix, you could take it into kind of an object-oriented Atmos mix. And then once we have, within the control room, if for some reason you wanted to have your Atmos mix and see how it's going to fold down. So once we go to your down mix presets, here you could just, if you're working, theoretically for an Atmos mix, that it should automatically fold down to whatever particular playback. That's kind of the beauty of the concept of the object-oriented. So if you have 63 channels in your system for monitoring, like in a movie theater, that the Atmos mix would automatically scale across all of the mixers, or if you're doing a 7.14 or a 5.1 or stereo or mono, your Atmos mix should automatically scale downward. But to be more accurate, I would always, most engineers I know start with the stereo mix and then build a 5.1 mix from there and then build an Atmos mix. But the 5.1 is going to be discrete channels, and Atmos would allow you to kind of have it automatically scale down for whatever monitoring system you have. So like a 5.1 isn't necessarily designed to translate to a mono or a 3-channel or 2-channel system. You can get an idea, but just using kind of the down mix presets that you have in the control room can do that. But Atmos theoretically should do that for you automatically. Some people have different feelings on that, whether it's an accurate representation. So all right. All right, so we have Peter just joining us from Montreal, Canada. Hope you're well. We have Calote sending greetings from Portugal. Thanks for joining us today. We have Randy Lee Music just saying he's arrived. All right. You see a question from Calote. Hi, in Cubase 15 Pro Windows 11, how can I use it as a live looper? I mean, record one sound, it loops, playing that sound, record a new sound, it loops, and so on. Thanks in advance. All right, so let's say we'll just do a new project here. So I'm not sure if you're doing it as audio or MIDI, but we could really kind of just do the same thing. So let's say, okay, we'll start with like a groove agent part here. All right, let's add maybe a bass part. Okay, so I'll just have a couple of instruments kind of set up here. And let's say if we want to add an audio track, a couple audio tracks. Okay, so let's say I want to do like a 2-measure part. Okay, so let me check my audio connections here quickly. Okay, transpose my keyboard down. All right, let's get my keyboard transposition set up here. Sorry about this. I think I accidentally transposed it on last live stream, so let me just check. Okay, so let's say I want to put this in like a 2-measure loop. All right, so I'm going to just come over here and just All right, so say I want to go to my bass part now. So let's say now I just want to come over here. If I actually could play my piano well. So now if I wanted to just come over here and just record audio, so I could, I don't have anything connected into my audio input, but I could now just come over here, record a different audio part. And so I could select a different track and then just immediately kind of come over here and just kind of loop all of my parts together very easily. So once I have everything set up, I can just put it into a cycle mode and select my different tracks and just record and capture just like that. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay, we see Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. Thanks for joining us. All right, 54 Beatmaker asks, is there any way to know which particular third-party plugin is causing crash of Cubase? So a lot of times you may get a crash report afterwards. So if you kind of start up a program and you may see something along the lines that looks like this. And you may see at the top says like Cubase is recovering from a crash from this particular plugin, and sometimes the plugin will be called out here. Sometimes, depending how the plugin crashes, it may not generate it in a report, but there's generally going to be a crash report. Often you could kind of look at the crash report, sometimes using AI tools to kind of figure out what the crash report is. And sometimes it's just knowing, it's like, okay, when I use this particular plugin, this one causes problems, you know, and it's kind of sometimes has to be almost like down to, you know, to kind of different use cases, because plugins could be causing crashes, you know, on different systems, but sometimes you'll see it listed in the safe start mode. And you know, often you may have to spend a little bit of time isolating it depending on how the plugin crashes. So, all right, so we have Craig Noble says hello from West Virginia. Cubase 14 using auto punch in, punch in point set in the middle of a measure, snap off, record still starts at the previous measure. Suggestions. So if it's going to be MIDI, I'm not sure if it's MIDI or audio, but if it is MIDI, there is a preference. So when we go to, it might be under record MIDI to snap MIDI parts to bars. So if it is going to be a MIDI device or MIDI track or an instrument track, try going to the record, go to your preferences under record MIDI, and make sure that snap parts to bars is unchecked and see if that does it. If it's audio, let me know. But if it's MIDI, try that particular preference. All right, so we see Rick Ballantyne has a film projects and he has those different surround formats for requirements for the deliverables. So yeah. All right, so we see Vince as Flyvy joining from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us again. All right, so we see Brian from the UK, but living in Spain, purchased Cubase 15 Artist and looking to upgrade to Pro. So thanks for joining us today. Let me know what part of Spain you're in, just out of curiosity. So we have Gareth from Bilbao, and we also have Pablo from Galicia. I've been in Spain a number of times. Not in a long time, but always enjoyed my time there. All right, so we see Beverly Beatty joining from Vancouver, Canada. Thanks for being part of the community. We see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. So it looks like our free virtual ice cream distribution shall begin. And first ice cream, 1 gallon, is going to Chocolate Marshmallow Swirl to Jazz Dude for all his work. So we see from Flyv, it says, I still have one track that is always red in my starting template. I've changed it and saved it, but it doesn't go away. Ever seen this before? So I haven't seen that, but let me know if when you go to the colors, out of curiosity, so if you hold down like Alt or Option and click here, if red is the very first color. So let me know if that's the first color, and also if the behavior changes, like when you're making a new template. I saw your video, sorry I didn't get a chance to respond to it. And see if when you go to under user preferences, under user interface to track and mix console channels, if you have this as use track's default color, if you set it there and apply that, if that makes a change when making a new template. If you could let me know that would be helpful. Sorry I didn't respond to your video, but it seemed like you were doing everything right with as I was. And I'd be happy, Flyv, to just if you want, I could remotely take a quick look at your system if you want to send me another email. All right, so you see from Rick Ballantyne says, thanks, Greg. Jazz Dude have some deliverables and now want me to deliver finished mixes, including dialogue. So I guess I need to bite the bullet and buy all the speakers. Yeah, it's not a fun thing getting a 714 speakers and explaining to your wife why you need to run wires to the ceiling and stuff. All right, so we see Soren checking in from Sweden. Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, and we see from Flyv says, even if I start with the default color gray. Yeah, so let me know, maybe tomorrow or Thursday if you have time. I might have some time to remotely look at your system real quick if that works for you. All right, and we see that Flyv's gotten 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream from Mr. Teams. All right, we have Razel Zamini joining from Denmark, and John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Michael Teams has granted me in my family 1 gallon of chocolate peanut butter ice cream. He says he has a question, but he can't remember at the moment. All right. All right, so we see from 54 Beatmaker, 54, can you please give some example how to draw modulation, aftertouch, and other MIDI CC in a key editor, not recording with the MIDI keyboard, but drawing with the mouse. Okay, so when we do this, we could just kind of come over here. So let's just look at, we're going to open up the particular editor here, and then once we see the lower zone, generally where we see our velocity control, we can now kind of switch. If we click here, we can say, okay, I want to draw in modulation. So we see, okay, now I want to, when I come here, we'll see that this should turn into a pencil tool, and now I could just draw in my MIDI CC. So let's say, okay, we have modulation. Let's say we want to do aftertouch. I could come right over here, and I have a little bit of aftertouch, but we could draw that in. Now we have not only just the pencil tool. So let's say if I extend this part out, and I will come over here, we'll just duplicate these notes, give some more data. Okay, so let's say if we are here, now not only do we have just the pencil tool to kind of draw in CC data, but there is a dedicated drawing tool. It may defaultly look like this. So if we wanted to have like a line for, like, let's say your modulation data, it could come over here, just have a line up or a line down. If you wanted to be more creative, we could say, okay, I want to have a parabola. So now we could draw in parabola, and if I hold down, we see that it's kind of arced this way. If we undo that and hold down, we could, and hold down the Alt or Option key, we could change the direction of the arc as well. Now, if we come over, let's say I want to now draw in a number of, like, I want this to repeat over and over again, I could hold down my Alt or Option key to kind of change the frequency. So if I want that to kind of arch over time, we could just kind of draw that in. And if we have a straight line and we need to do Bezier curves, so let's say I have just kind of like a straight fade out here, if we kind of hover over the center part, we can now just come over here and draw in different curves. If we wanted to draw in, some other types of, so if I wanted this to be sine waves, I could hold down my Shift key to kind of change the frequency of this. So I want those to have like two arches per measure. We could do that. So we could change the frequency by holding down the Shift key. So if I again want to come over here, say, okay, I want this to be over 2 measures. And now as I draw in, we could change the frequency. So we could have sine wave, triangle wave, square wave, and also kind of freely, where we could just freely paint MIDI CCs in. Some other editing techniques that you could do, if we select a range of MIDI CC, we could raise and lower and keep the proportionality. By going to the center line, I could tilt by going to the upper left-hand corner. So if I want to tilt the beginning or tilt the end, we could do that as well. If I wanted to bring everything up here, we could also just say, okay, I want to go to the right center, and I can kind of compress or expand. If I want to just take, say I like this particular pattern, I could select those. I could also duplicate, so I could hit Control or Command plus the letter D and duplicate that particular range as well. So this way you can have lots of different tools for kind of drawing in different types of MIDI CC data. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see Benny joining from Sweden. Thanks for being part on. Thanks for everyone I know we have a different time with daylight savings time that changed in the United States, but not in other countries. All right, so we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam. All right, so we see, do we need to set up these MIDI CC? I didn't hear them after drawing MIDI CC. So, MIDI CC may respond to different, so let's say if I have my MIDI CC here, we'll play this. So the instrument may not respond to particular MIDI CC, but let's say, generally everything will respond to volume. So if I draw in, let's say if I just kind of come here and we select like our straight volume tool, and when I go to, let's say we'll just switch this to our line tool. So now as we do this, we'll hear the volume decrease. take it off the cycle. So if you draw in MIDI CC1 and the instrument doesn't change as a result of MIDI CC1, Cubase is sending the MIDI information out to the instrument. How the instrument responds to those incoming MIDI data is different for every single instrument. Generally, all the instruments will follow panning and volume. Instruments may respond differently to like modulation or expression depending on the design of the instrument. So just because you draw in modulation, if modulation doesn't do anything to alter or change the current particular sound, then it's not going to have any impact with that. Okay. We have VS Terranova just saying hello to everyone. All right, Indie Beer asks, is there an active part lock option in Cubase when editing MIDI? Clicking ghost notes with the mouse accidentally switches the active part. All right, so when we have like multiple MIDI parts, so let's say if I'm looking at this, all right, and let's say I'll change the colors here to make them a little more obvious when we, so let's say we have red-ish here, let's say green, and let's make this one more bluish. All right, so if I'm in the editor, and let me just synchronize the views here. All right. So there isn't necessarily a lock, but you could, because the intention is that you may want to, and I'll just change the color here to colorize by part. So as soon as we select another voice, we can make that voice active. When I come here to the Rhodes, I can see that. I can see the particular drums, but there isn't necessarily a way to lock that because people always want the option to easily kind of jump back and forth to, why we're multiply editing parts is so that we could, toggle easily back and forth. So that's kind of the design intention. So when we come here, we could actually, be able to switch back and forth. We had kind of a request for the ability to kind of lock and not to be able to alter those particular ones. And there isn't necessarily like a setting for that where they're visible, because when they're visible, we want you to be able to kind of switch back and forth between the different voices easily as well. All right, so we see from FlyV, it just says in preferences, I have it set as use previous track color +1, and he has it all fixed now. So that's great. Thanks for letting me know. All right, we see Brian Sawyer is Brian DeBear checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Hope you're well. And he's received 1 gallon of pumpkin spice ice cream for him and his wife. So it seems early for pumpkin spice ice cream, but it's always a good flavor. It's usually come October 1st in the U.S., everything turns into pumpkin spice, especially at Starbucks and different ice cream flavors. All right, so we see Steinberg MIDI says, I'm born in 1984 and was born for Cubase Nation. That's good. You're as old as Steinberg is as a company. Been there for almost 34 of the 40, I guess we're going 43 years. All right, and Michael Teams is granted Steinberg MIDI 1 gallon of Kahlua mocha ice cream. All right, so I know we have like different time changes. So I know we had a question that was in that we had from last live stream of, I was working on a macro for it, which I think I got figured out. And the question was how to import multiple audio files, and I think it was Nuendo specifically, but it would be the same for Nuendo and Cubase, and to have them on different tracks and to stagger the events so that each event would automatically go on, follow right after the existing event, but on a subsequent track. So I was playing around with the macro and I think I got it sorted out. So let me show you that. All right, so let's come over here and we'll just import some different audio files here. Okay, so I'm going to drag all of these and we'll put on one track currently. So let's say we have a lot of little audio files and we want, again, to take each of these files and be able to start with this file, take this track, basically move it down a track, go to the next track, move it down. So let's take a look how we could build a macro for this. So what we want to do is to build a macro, we're going to go to your key commands, which could be if you're on a Windows platform in the edit menu. Let's make a new macro. We'll call this Stagger Tracks. All right, so the first one that we want to add is we're going to navigate make sure my keyboard is okay. Okay, so our first command that we want to do is I'm going to start with the first track selected. So I'm going to navigate to the right. So I'm going to add that command. Let's go to, and what I want to do is to set the left and right locators around the selection. So we'll see a function under transport locators to the selection start. And this is kind of the L key. So this is going to move the cursor to the start of the next event. All right, and then there's a logical editor preset that is standard that comes with it called select. Okay, so let's come over here to the process. I think it's Project Logical Editor. Okay, so there's a select all data on selected tracks beyond cursor. So we're going to add that command. Then we're going to add a track audio. So we'll collapse all these and we'll see add track audio. Let's add that command. Then we're going to nudge down. And that's basically going to move the event downward. Then we're going to just choose to not select any events. So we'll say select none. Let's add that command. And then we're going to, again, navigate to the right to kind of start this process over again. So now just hit the right arrow. Okay, now as we do this, when we get the add tracks, we may have to hit the enter key just to, because it's going to pop up the dialog. So in case you need to switch it from mono to stereo. So let's go ahead and give this macro a try. So again, the intention is we take this, move this over, move this. We're going to add an audio track, move this, move all these down to the next track, go to the next event, move that down. So let's go over here and we'll go to our key commands. And I'll move it over here so we can see. So I'm going to just execute the macro. So again, we're going to navigate to the right. We're going to locate the selection start. We're going to select all the events beyond a cursor on the selected track. We're going to add an audio track. We're going to nudge all those events down. We're going to select none and then navigate to the right. So let's give this a try. So we'll come over here. Let's go ahead and run the macro. So we'll come right over here. We're going to add the track. Thought I had that. Let me just make sure I had. I had this working before, so let me just. All right. Let me just try. One track at a time. All right, just try to break this down. All right, so let's. All right, so it looks like it's in that one step. Sorry about this. Thought I had this dialed in. so let me just it's this one command that's I'll see if I can come back to that, but that one, let me just check that logical editor preset, see if it got changed. Just look up beyond cursor, see if this is. So maybe I don't have that preset on this computer, so let me just see if I could. Okay, so say we're going to do our media type is equal to audio, and we're going to just choose to select this, and say our position is beyond cursor. All right, so say if my cursor is okay, so maybe I just had the, all right, so I'm going to save this as a preset. Okay, so I'm going to remove this command. And let's go back to our key commands. Okay, so let's add that command. All right, let's remove this track here. See if I have that in the right position. Okay, so we're going to add track. Okay, so now come over here. So we just can run the macro and add the track. So as we come over here, so we can just hit enter and continue to do. And now all of our particular tracks are staggered. So if we want to come over and look at this, we could just see. So again, to do that, we will make a, I think that there may be a project logical editor preset that's by default. If not, we could come here to the project logical editor. We'll go to setup, and we could also say we want to select all the events. We could also add a condition of property is set to is selected if you need it to. So we're going to select events, audio events that are beyond a cursor, And then for the macro, again, just come right over here to your key commands. And we'll go to navigate to the right. We're going to locate the selection start, so that moves the cursor to the start of the next event. We're going to process this project logical editor preset. We're going to add an audio track. We can name it, change it from stereo to mono, or just hit enter to close it. We're going to nudge all the events down. We're going to select none and then navigate to the right and kind of start the whole process. So we select the very first event here and we run the macro. So we select the macro here and now all the tracks can be staggered and put onto their own tracks just that easily. So try that macro out. Sorry, my logical editor preset wasn't working. All right, let's jump back to live questions. Okay. Okay, so we see from Indie Beer, can you explain active part editing, please? Okay, so let's go back to previous project here. All right, so let's say we have multiple parts. So let's say I select all my MIDI parts here, and I double click. Let me just select just the MIDI and no audio. All right, so say I'm here, and we're now in our editor. Now we could pick and choose like what parts we're seeing in the editor. So once we're in the full screen editor, we can pick and choose what parts that we're seeing. So if this is going to be the bass part, or if I want to see the drum part, I want to see the drum and bass, or I want to see just the keyboard part. So we can see our different parts here. Now we could colorize these based on the part so that the note events themselves will actually reflect the colors. So if my electric piano is blue, my bass is green, and my drums are red, we could, as we click on particular events. Now as we come over here, we could choose which part is active by just clicking here on the left hand side, so we can see all these are visible, and which part is the active part you could just simply switch directly here, and then so we see the other parts as a reference. So you can say, okay, I just want to get rid of this particular note. So once I do that, my piano part becomes the active part, and then we could choose to just erase particular notes and do editing, and then we can toggle back and forth between the two events. Just erase this particular note. So we could switch the parts, which part is active, by clicking right here, or just by clicking here in the list column. And we could also just kind of see all of our different parts directly here at top. So if we want to be able to select our different parts, we could also just kind of see our reflection directly at the top there. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Beverly Beatty asks, Greg, how do I put a photo of my VST synth into the inspector window, such as Nexus 5 Image or third-party synth? So any plugin that you want to see, let's say when we come over here to like your media, to VST instruments. So if you, like let's say here I have the omnivocal, I don't see an image for that, so I could add an omnivocal track. So when we come over here, I could just say, okay, let's add our instrument track, I don't have it as an active project, sorry. Okay, so when we go to add an instrument track here, so let's say I have omnivocal that I want to use. All right, but when I see my media over here and we look at our VST instruments, I don't see an image here. So every plugin, whether it's a third-party plugin or not, you can come right over here and you see like a little camera icon in the upper right-hand corner. So we see no image here. I'm going to take a little picture of the plugin, and now we could have that picture. So third-party plugins work the same exact way, no difference. We can just come right over here and look for like the little camera icon in the upper right-hand corner and take a picture, and then that picture will automatically populate in the media bay for you. All right. All right, so we have Robbie and Becky asks, hi Greg, question. Is there a way to create a macro that opens certain tracks with already set up things by default? Example, volume, pan, effects, etc. So is it for the track controls? So let's say if we are here, we could, so that we do have like different track controls, so we could switch from like a simple mode to standard mode on our track controls here to recording mode. So we have different presets that we could utilize here. So let me know if it's going to be for these, and if we want it to kind of set these up, what we could do, it's not necessarily a macro to do this, but you could say, okay, I wanted to see my on when I come here for mixing, we could say, okay, I want to add my volume and pan controls. So now I hit apply, and as we kind of come over to, let's say, an audio track, when we come here, we could see my volume and pan controls. Now, when we do this, realize that, we can come over here and save this as a preset. So we'll say, let's save a preset, and we'll call this Club Cubase. And then we could have different settings for instrument tracks, for sampler tracks, for the controls in the drum track, MIDI, group tracks, markers, chords, video, folder tracks, etc. So now when we come over here, we could save presets for all these different settings. So if I know that I always want to have my Club Cubase settings, I could recall that and have quick access. So, and if we come here to, again, the little settings cogwheel, we can say, okay, my instrument tracks, I want to see volume and pan as well. So I'll come over here, and we could save that as our preset for instruments. So you may have different presets for tracking versus mixing versus editing. So now when we come over here, I could go to my simple. So if I want very kind of clean, uncluttered, and now this is my Club Cubase settings, I can just easily kind of toggle back and forth. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to work with. All right. All right, so we have a question from USA Roman, or USA Roman. Is there any indication of when Cubase running on Windows will no longer support VST2 plugins? So, it's still currently supported. The last two versions, it's turned off by default. So on the Mac platform, VST2 plugins won't work if you want to run Apple Silicon Native. So you don't see the options if you're running on Apple Silicon Native already. But there hasn't been an official announcement. I thought that it might be at 15, that it may not be available to see VST2 plugins in, with version 15, but it's still working. So I'm not sure when that Steinberg hasn't announced it'll be cut off. But they haven't announced that it's going to be continued either. So currently 15 is still supporting VST2 plugins. We realize that there are some plugins that, companies have gone out of business and there's no VST3 version. VST3 has been around since 2008. So it's 18 years old now. So, companies have had chances to be able to migrate to VST3 pretty successfully. Great. See John Costigan, someone's describing weather as being bipolar today. So there you see Steinberg MIDI is very close to Dallas. Let's see, Steinberg MIDI says, if we got to Hamburg to visit Jazz and Michael, I'm taking you and Sable with me. So I think Jazz Dudes may be like 4 or 5 hours away from Hamburg, if I'm not mistaken. It says when he gets brave enough to fly across the big ocean. So I think Germany is a wonderful place to go. And always love Hamburg. I haven't been in a long time. See, Fly V says it's quite the macro. So you see Jazz Dude, just Michael Teams wondering if he's in Heidelberg. So I went up to the big castle in Heidelberg one time when I was at the Frankfurt show. We took a day off and went to Heidelberg, up the castle on the big hill at the Apothecary Museum. So beautiful city. See, Jazz Dude says Hamburg has fish. All right, so we see Stefan Larsson joining from Sweden. All right, so you see Rex from Batman Studios says, I've been here but streaming on my phone while making breakfast, most important meal of the day. All right, so it looks like Alexander, I believe, is joining us, saying hello to everyone. All right, so Steve Lead says, hi, Greg, I want to upgrade my Spectral Layers Go to the Pro version. Activation Manager does not recognize me. It says username and password invalid. What's wrong here? Thanks. So see if you go to like your My Steinberg account, if it is logged, if you're logged in. So let's say if we come over here and you go to steinberg.net and you go to your My Steinberg account. So here we could log in. So see if you actually, can log into your My Steinberg account if you have the same. Something else that you could do if you're logged into your My Steinberg account, you could try to also just simply try to log out and log back in, but see if you're kind of signed in. Make sure, because you might have to, when you go to your activation manager, try going to the activation manager. So let's say if we're here, and it could be, make sure that you're logged in. Maybe log out and log in, sign out. So see if you're signed in to your activation manager itself. And I would check that and check your credentials. If not, you may have to contact Steinberg support about resetting credentials. But it's probably just maybe the Steinberg activation manager, maybe try to log in, log out. If you change web browsers or had a web browser update, it might also force you to kind of re-trigger logging in. So let me know if that works for you, Steve. All right, so we see Greg question, should I upgrade to Absolute 7 if I already own Absolute 6? Groove Agent 6 is nice, but overall I got MIDI instruments like Tails and Verve, etc. So I think Etude is worth it. I think, if you're doing like rock stuff, the Axe Machina or Axe Machina, however you want to pronounce it, as long as you use it, we don't care how you pronounce it. I think the Carrier 8, which is FM Lab presets, is pretty stellar. Also, the colors, the orchestral colors is a great instrument. And so those are like, very, very strong instruments. In addition, for me, I would buy it, the upgrade cost is worth it just for the Carrier 8 sounds. So I'll play just a couple, so you get ideas of Carrier 8 is kind of presets for FM Lab, and it's like stuff that you wouldn't typically think of, like FM synths. You also get a Retrolog library. So let's say we come over here to Advanced. And let's go to the Carrier 8. But these are just like really... So really creative. Kind of like song inspiring presets. And we haven't even gotten to the letter C yet. So just like, I think the Carrier 8 is just a wonderful instrument. So, but great instruments with Absolute 7. So I think it's definitely worth the upgrade. Plus all the great stuff you get with Groove Agent 6, including the new punch kit and the colors. So lots of great content that's in there. Right, so we see Flyveach says I just got the macro, missed 10 minutes. All right, so you see Jazz Dude is about 500 miles south of Hamburg. Yes, hey, Hamburg is kind of like, for U.S. people, it's kind of the northwestern corner. It's kind of the like Seattle of Germany. All right, so we have Claes joining from Malmo, Sweden. All right, so we have Roland Stuff joining from Sussex, England. Says it has to be way shortly, but please leave a light on in a window. You shall return later. So, hey, Greg, how do you feel about free third-party plugins, and can they be detrimental to Cubase 15? And have you heard of plugins we definitely shouldn't use? Also, Cubase and Tahoe, how are we doing there? So, I think Cubase has been fine on Tahoe, but there's a lot of, third-party components that may not be. And sometimes I find that, the free plugins are, I like free plugins as much as anyone else. So, I'll check out Bedroom Producer's blog periodically, see if there's, companies doing like a stupid deal on plugins and take advantage of it. Someone's giving like a free teaser plugin. Waves does it a lot. Universal Audio will give away a plugin here or there. So I haven't really run into a plugin that I think of as being like really problematic. I think it's a little less of an issue now that most people are utilizing VST3 plugins, because it could be a little more, it could be a little more defined as to what's going on. And it's a better kind of known entity, and it's a more stable platform, which is why VST3 was originally developed. I think at one point they found it was something like 87% of the crashes that people were experiencing in Cubase when he did analysis of it were from like VST2 plugins. So I think VST3 plugins in general have a real high level of stability. But no plugins kind of really jump out at me, but maybe other people could share if they've run into particular plugins. But I don't think free ones are as worse or less problematic or more problematic than kind of commercial plugins. All right, so we see from Deemster78 says, hi Greg, huge fan of Sampler Track, but experiencing bugs when reopening older files, chops disappeared, pitches not saved, samples lost, tips, 14 Pro on Mac. So one of the things, so I haven't really run into it. I use Sampler Track quite a bit on my personal stuff, just kind of for different sounds. But let's say if I just want to just jump back here and this is fine. So let's say we have this and I've sliced it up here. So, one thing that you can do with the sampler track that a lot of people don't, that can cause, one thing, I think this was made a little easier in 15, but might have happened in 14. But when you come over, so let's say, we've done a good amount of sample chopping here. And then we want to save it as a track preset. So, we could come over here, and let me just close this out real quick, sorry. So let's say we want to save track preset. We'll say March 10th, 2026. Okay, so sometimes the sampler track may get disassociated with the particular project. So when we do this, I can now go to a new project, and so we go to a new project here, and we say, okay, we're going to create empty. Let's add a track preset. So we'll go to our user presets, and so we'll click on our user presets. We'll get to our track presets, to sampler. So we see March 10th. All right. So the one thing that can often to be aware of. So we can see that now we can open that in any particular project. And this is kind of using the audio file from its original location. If you have problems with it, kind of like maybe the file not returning, try going into the pool window, and if we look at our sampler track here, we can see, okay, we have our sampler track. We could see that this probably isn't going to be in the actual, so if this isn't in the particular audio project, one of the things that you could do is if you just kind of right click and do a prepare archive, we could basically move all of the samples directly into the particular project folder. Or, if we save it, so, sometimes people will, move the audio file in the sampler track is looking for the audio file in a particular location with a preset. And if that audio file has been moved, or if there's a file with the same name, that could have like kind of the wrong information. So make sure that when you're saving a track preset, but you could also choose to within the particular project just to come over, and when you open a pool window, just right click and say, prepare archive, and that will move all of the files into like the audio project folder. But if you have like a particular preset that you want to share with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and you could send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Beverly Beatty, hi Greg, second part of question, to get the photo of Omnivox as a track picture. I can see when I click on the square, 3 options, factory, user, and import, but I don't see a picture for Omnivocal in the list. So usually when we make the picture here, so I'm not sure if you want to do as a track picture. So if we come over here, so let's say we make this larger. Let me just make an instrument track. And let me just see if I need to go to my track control settings. So if you want it to be kind of like for the track picture show up like right here. So I'm not sure if you want the picture to be here, or if you want the picture to be like in the track area. Let me just see if we go over here to our mixer. So if we come over here, maybe if you want it to be like one of the track pictures here. So I think if we go to user, we can say import, And I think if we go, I'm trying to remember, I always forget where this is, but let's go to Documents. It might be like under Pictures. Let me just... and go to VST thumbnails. So let's say we want to do the one that we just added today. So now when I come over here, I could have the track picture for that particular track. So let's just see if we could get my track control settings to see the picture here. Let's say on a sampler track. But let me know if that's it, because you could now just kind of come over here and go to, again, user, go to import, look under Steinberg, under documents, Steinberg VST thumbnails, and then you could import any track picture there and have access to it. Just try, see if I add an audio track. So you could just kind of add the track picture there. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, Beverly. All right. See, Bratman Studios just saying Absolute 7 for $99 is way worth the upgrade. Brilliant sounds, and Carrier 8 is fantastic for song ideas and rhythms. All right, so Steinberg MIDI says, I think I bought my Cubase 11 around spring break, and it was on sale for like the price, for like half the price, if I remember correctly. All right, so we see from Steve Leeds, thanks for the account info. I also lost audio on playback of imported files in Cubase 14 Pro. I've checked for fixes online, but can't remedy the problem. All right, so let me know. So if you lost audio for playback of imported files, so let me know if it's every file that you import. Let me know if you go to like Media Bay here. So let's say if you know, because you get lots of loops with Cubase. So if you, let me know if you drag a loop over to an audio file, if this works. Because a lot of times when we're doing previewing of samples, that may be routed through the control room. Also, let me know if you go into your audio connections and if you want to send a screenshot. So if you have the outputs tab, if you have the control room configured here. So generally what I do, if you have Cubase Pro, you could just right click and add a monitor and then just set this up to, like, let's say this is my HS7 monitors and I want to use my mix left and right there for that. And now I'm routing it through the control room, so the control room could be kind of like its own monitoring stage. So if I come here, I could control the volume, and if my control room is set to a different source, I may not hear anything. So if you have different Q mixes are set up, you may have to click on the mix, or if you have different speakers selected here, make sure that you have the right speaker and that this volume is up if you're utilizing the control room. But if you want to send like some screenshots, I'd be happy to look at it. If you want to share like your audio connections menu, so just go to your studio to audio connections right there. And you can send that to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Right. All right. So you see Alexander saying he's scoring for a picture. So. And he just mentioned sometimes Logic has free upgrades, but generally they also make you buy new computers and not compatible with older computers as much. All right, so Flyv was just asking, can you quickly show me the stagger tracks macro, please? I have one part of it missing. Okay, so it's going to be a combination of, let's say, my project logical editor preset. So here we're going to just see if we probably still have it open. So we go to my project logical editor. We're going to select audio that's beyond the cursor. Save that as a preset if you don't have it already in. And let's look at the steps for the staggered tracks. So I'll make this a little taller. So we're going to navigate to the right. Transport, we're going to move the locate selection start. So that moves the cursor to the beginning of the next event. We're going to process this project logical editor preset. So if you have to save it, we're going to add an audio track. And that way we can name it if you want. We could choose whether it's mono or stereo. We could then nudge downward. We're going to edit to select none of the events. And then we're going to navigate to the right, which will select the first event, and then we could start the whole process over again. So you could, I'll just leave that up for a second just in case you need to recreate it. But you could always pause the video as well. That way you could stagger each of the tracks, like multiple tracks on a single track, 2 different tracks, and stagger the time as well. Just simply move those down. All right. Let me know if you have any problems getting that working. Okay, so we see from Deemster78, it says, okay, thanks. Didn't know about the track preset nor the pool archive option. Very much appreciate it. Okay, so we have the Liquid Blue Band joining from Vancouver. So we have a couple people from Vancouver. All right. All right, we have Uno Memento joining from Finland. Glad you can make it today. All right, Perceptive Audio asks, hey Greg, how do I save my presets into custom instrument preset folders so that they show up in a media zone? I want to make presets of drums, pianos, synths, etc. All right, so let's go ahead and, so let's say if I open up a Hallion 7 here, all right, so let's say I have all right, so let's say I want to save this as a preset, so I'm going to just click right over here. We go to our preset management and we'll say save. So let's make it, I'll just say, okay, let's go to March 10th, 2026. Okay, all right. So when we go to navigate, user presets are kind of in a different spot when we want to do it from the media zone. So I'm going to come over here. Let's get to our media zone. I'll go home. So we have kind of our normal presets, but we also have just kind of a dedicated user presets. So now I can say, okay, we want to go to VST instrument presets, and then you can say, okay, I want to come right over here, and we can see here's our March 10th, 2026. Once we're in the particular instrument, you know, so if I come over here to Hallion, and we load up a new instance of Hallion 7, so let's say I'm in Anima. So now I could come over here and we will see, you know, our March, if we rescan, let me just go to Media Bay. I'll just rescan this real quick as I had time to do a rescan. So let's say we go to our VST3 presets, and let's just, so we can see our March 10th preset. So now when we come over here, let's say we want to go to all, and we just type in like March 10th. So we can just simply look for it there. But, you know, when we're looking at it in the right zone media bay, at this time, what we want to do is start from user presets, and then you can see your VST instruments. And now when we drag this over, you know, if I just, or just double click on it, we can just come right over there and have that particular instrument loaded up for us. All right, I think I got a quick email, maybe from Beverly, with a question on her topic. So let me see if I can take a quick look at it. Okay, so, all right, so we see, thanks for sending over the picture, Beverly. So when you have, let's say I have an event here. All right, so it could be that because you're in the in-place editor on that particular track. So let me just come over here. So generally, it's like, so you are in the in-place editor. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing my picture field here. Let me just, it's usually kind of in the lower left-hand corner here. But it could be because, just check one more time. Oh, we're going to show track pictures. Okay. Okay, so now when I come over here, so if you don't see like the track pictures field, right click and you could hide the track pictures or show track pictures. And then you could see that we could, come over here. We have factory, and then we also have kind of user presets. So you could import, like if you take a picture of the guitar amp, you could actually just simply, take a picture and save that with the particular project so you know like what particular settings you're using. So let me just take a look one more time at the picture you sent over, Beverly, and see if you have it. Yeah, so make sure that you right click and show track pictures, and then you should be able to double click and have like factory presets or user imported presets directly there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, so we see from Bratman Studio, just says, Greg, I'm enjoying playing my Roland drums into Cubase 15 Pro. I find it has a nice natural sound through MIDI with little latency, great, but sometimes in a shuffle feel, quantizing it seems to destroy the feel. Hint. So make sure, a lot of times when people are doing it, come over here and just make sure that you don't have auto quantize on. So a lot of times people may be playing something straight and they have auto quantize on, and then it's kind of quantizing. It's like, oh, I feel really tight when I'm playing. I listen to it. It's like, man, my timing's great. So, but if your quantize is set for 16th notes and you're trying to do a shuffle and auto quantize is on, it may make your shuffle like a more straight, rigid feel. So make sure that AQ isn't enabled here in just the left lower part in the transport zone. So try that. All right, so we see from Vince, says, thanks again, Greg. He has it all saved. That's great. See Jazz Dude saying the only reason Logic is Apple hardware, especially laptops, to train composing. Yeah, it's interesting when you do research on different programs that utilize all of the processing cores on Macs. It's pretty surprising. All right, so Gresham Makwena asks, I'm trying to write drum staff in Cubase Pro 13. I'm failing to add extra lines, so I put every drum part on their designated line for easy reading. So if this is going to be like for notation purposes, let me just close this out. So a lot of times you want to make sure that so I'm going to add an instrument track. Let's go to like Groove Agent. All right, and I want to call this like drum kit. A lot of times like the notation could really depend on, like you make assumptions based upon the particular name. So let's say if I come over to like my studio kit here, all right. Okay, so now let's say if I create a part, All right, so if you want to enter in drums in a notation editor, since it's a drum kit, I called it a drum kit, I'm going to come over and let's just say, okay, I want to, we'll just grab notes. So I want to put in just all right, and let me see if I have, maybe if I have to create the drum map from the instrument. So let me come over here. Let's see if that makes a difference. All right, so let's say now I'm going to put in eighth notes. And let's put in some hi-hats. So I think if I... All right, so let's say if we have this, and so now as we play, I'll just hit Control D. So now as we play here, and if you want to put in like tom fills, we could just kind of come over here. So it could help to have the, make sure like it's called like drum kit, and that perhaps if you have the drum map loaded up. So let's say I want to delete this note here, and let's put in all right, so now we will go ahead and just play from the beginning here. So let's say I want to start. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. So again, if you name it drum kit, then it will automatically go to drums. Within that drum track, if you have the ability to make a drum map, and then when you go into the score editor, you could just at that point, just enter in the typical drum notation that you have, and then it will kind of do the voices and change the voices for you automatically. So it makes it very clean and easy for drum notation. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, reading through comments. People, Chesty, talking about the escalation in the price of RAM. All right, so we see Fly-V is just saying I have that macro exactly the same as yours, but it's not leaving the first track as it goes downward. All right, so let's take a look. Let's see if I have all those files. Okay. All right, so I have the very first one selected, the very first event selected. And when you do this, so let's say I run the macro, so I'm going to open up the macro again. And, make sure that when you do this, so let's come over here to I'll just do it for the keyboard key commands so we could see it. All right, so we could have this kind of stop halfway through. So when I do this, I'm going to run the macro, and we could see, so at this point, make sure, and it could be that to make sure that the song position is at the beginning and the first event is selected. So now when I come over here, and when you get prompted for this, we should see that the cursor, the song position cursor, is at the start of the second event, and that all of the events except for the first event are selected. So I'm going to add the track here, the macro. So this is almost like pausing the macro. When I click on add track, then it's going to add the track, and all of the selected events that we see with the dark background will be moved down, and this one is selected. And then run the macro again. So you could see if you just kind of pause here with the add track audio, that make sure that you could see if this is set up correctly, then all of these events will be selected from the cursor. But make sure that when you start, that the cursor is at the beginning and the first event is selected. And then you could come over here, then that will put it into kind of the same scenario so that macro can work. So sometimes with macros, like the cursor or like a selected event can be critical. So if I start here and my cursor is there and I run the macro, we can see that that is off. So make sure that your cursor is at the beginning. You can hit the period key on your numeric keypad, and make sure that the first event is selected, and see if that makes a difference for you, Vince. All right, so you see from Indie Beer, says, I notice that most tools respect active part editing, but the object selection tool switches the other parts when clicking reference notes or ghost notes. There is a part editing mode. Check it again. All right, so let's say, so when you're selecting the event with the selection tool, it will select the other events. So, so let's say if we're here, I have these three events. Let's go into, let's say, our key editor. All right, so if I use the selection tool, so when we come over here, we could just say, let me just move this up. Okay, so let's say we go to the active part here. So now, but again, if I come over here, I switch. When I select with the selection tool, it will select all of the particular events. So let's come over here. Let's go to our part editing mode. Let's say all parts on the active track. All right, so this will, if I have like this event here, I could select that, but still when I select and when I choose a different part, it's not a ghost. you know, it's not active, but it's not like a ghost, like a visual representation. When we select it with the selection tool, it does select that particular event. So then, you know, you could see your multiple parts up top here. So if you wanted to select, you know, from the top as well, you could do that. But, you know, selecting it with the, you know, selecting the other events, you know, selecting another event with the selection tool, since it's a selection tool, will select that particular event. All right, so you see from 5E just saying, the first event has to be selected only. Yeah, I think once you do that, then you're going to be good. All right, so we see Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see from Perceptive Audio, hey Greg, I want to make a range selection by using the next hit point. I can move to the next hit point, but I can't make a selection and skip through transients. All right, so let's take a look. Okay. All right, so I'm going to just look at this and we'll make sure that we have hit points. Okay, so we have hit points here. All right, I'll make this a bit taller. All right, so let's say we want to use our range selection tool. Okay, so I think that see if it's under like functions or select. So there is an enlarge range to next hit point. So if you just come over here, so once you go to, and so let's say if I want to assign that to keys on my MIDI remote, we'll come over here, make a new mapping page. Okay, so let's come over here. Go to the Edit menu. Enlarge range to next hit point. And we'll say to previous hit point. All right, so now when I select a range here, I'm just going to use these keyboard shortcuts to go to the next hit point or to the previous hit point. So again, try coming over here to select, and you could do it to the next audio segment. So we could just kind of, so if you're here, you could do it to the previous hit point or to the next hit point. So let me know if that works for you. So, but you say, but I can't make a selection and skip through transients. So if I just kind of keep doing it, then I'm skipping through the transients. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish with that. All right, so we see from Perceptive Audio just says, yes, thanks, Greg. So, all right. Randy Lee Music is back with his chili consumed. Now it's coffee time. You can't say it's coffee time in a live stream if I can't get a mocha in the middle of a live stream. But enjoy your coffee. We hope your chili was good. Sounds like a good dish to have. All right, let me go to another question that was mailed in. All right, we had a question last week, and I couldn't find the answer for it, but I did some research on it. Was how to do enharmonic shifts in the chord pads. All right, so when we want to do that, let's go to our chord pads. All right, so let's say we had, and I think the example was we have a C sharp minor chord, and we want this to be shown as a C sharp instead of a D flat. And I was kind of looking for a little icon. If we go to like the root key, here we're going to have our enharmonic shift. So we could switch that from sharp to flat directly there. So it's not, maybe not the most obvious place, but it does make sense. So when you come here, you could just select that particular chord and do your enharmonic shift right there. All right, let's see if we got more live questions. All right, Randy Lee Music has given me one virtual mocha. That's very kind of you and appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, we see Matt Elston just saying hi, Greg. Jazz Dude, Agent K, Jan, Michael Teams, an amazing Cubase community. Best wishes to everyone, a fantastic group. And thanks to Steinberg for the streams. All right, let me go to next question that was mailed in. All right, so we see, says, hi Greg, I have a small audio sample that has some drums in it, kick, snare, hi, and hats. I dragged in the audio sample into the sampler. I have set the transient markers. It is set up about 8 segments to the entire sample, but there's a snippet of sound snare I would like to keep in the library that I may use this sound a lot, like a favorite. Can I somehow tell Cubase 15 to export that snippet of audio from the sampler, or push it out to a Groove Agent SE and have the sample on a pad and save it a la carte from there? All right, so let's jump over to one of our projects. All right, let me activate this project. All right, so let's say we have kind of generic drum loop here. All right, so let's say if, you know, what I would, so if you have it in the sampler track, so let's go ahead and make sampler track here. Okay, so let's say we want to slice it up here. We're going to turn our slices on. Okay, so let's say we have a slice here that's going to be, and let me just unsolo. We'll have our sampler track. Let me just move this up to the top. Okay, so now Let me find like maybe a different loop where the snare is a little more apparent. Okay, so let's take this loop's kind of very obvious. Let me play it. All right, so I'm going to drag this to the sampler track, and let's go ahead and slice it up. All right, so now when we play, like I just want that particular sample. So one way of just extracting that, if you want, is just say, okay, we're going to go to, let's say, get my root note here. All right, so let's say I just want to put in one note. I can say, okay, let's put in a D natural. And so once I have that, what I could do is just say, okay, I'm going to render in place. So I'll just say, let's render in place. We go to our render settings, and we could just come right there. And now we have our sample. So as we do this, we could have our rendered file. So we could have that as our particular sample. Now with this particular sample, I could also just kind of take this note. So let's say I have this note, and I'll just put it right on the beat here. So there's a couple of different approaches. So if I have this note, so again, I could just say, let's render this in place. So if you just draw one particular note in, we could say, let's render with current settings. All right. Just all right, so we can render in place. We'll go to our render settings. We'll do our channel. And then we have, make sure, I think I may have had it selected. All right, sorry about that. My fault. All right, so let's go to a render in place. So I just wrote in the snare note, and then it will automatically be rendered. I probably made the same mistake. I had it selected, so make sure it's not record enabled. So you could just render it like that if you wanted to, but let's say I wanted to take, if I have that entire sampler track, let's come over here to the sampler track where we were. All right, so we have our notes here. We could, at this point, choose to, I'll kind of make this larger. Then we'll see like these three little arrows. So I'll take this directly to Groove Agent SE. So now we could see our and if I wanted to let's say I want to invert this selection, and then I could just say delete. Then I could just save this one snare as a preset. So we could save it as a preset. So again, we could come over here, we could save the preset as fave snare. And now it's only going to be this particular sound. If we want to right click, we could also, if you wanted to sell it to someone else and you wanted to export the kit with the samples. So if you right click on the samples here, you could choose export kit with samples, give it a name, say I wanted to save it to my desktop. We'll make a new folder. All right, so we have let me just make sure we have a folder set up. And then you could just simply export the files. So let's just give it a name here. Make sure it's going. All right, and now when we want to go to our desktop, you just go to, and then you could just have your particular sample right there, but you could just simply save this as a preset, and that way your snare will always be available. So just kind of drag and drop it into the sampler track. From the sampler track, we can just come over from the sampler track and migrate the sampler track directly over. So if you have a sampler track here, you hit the 3 arrows, that will take it into Groove Agent. And then from Groove Agent, you could select just the snare, right click and invert selection. And that way you could just save that particular snare as you want. So give that a try. All right, let me jump back to some live questions. And you can always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have Groove Music 6716 on. Thanks for joining us today. See, Uno Memento is feeling a little sick, has a fever. So hope you feel better soon. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, you remembered his question, imported an audio track, but it is sharp to the key. How to adjust this track to match the key? Thanks. So make sure that it is not, if it's not exactly one semitone sharp or flat, it sounds like perhaps there's a sample rate mismatch. So let's say if I go to import, we'll create an empty project here and we'll import a file. right, so let's say we have this. All right, so when I look at the file here, we'll go into our pool, and we're just going to verify our sample rates at 44.1 for this file. All right. So let's say I switch my sample rate here into my project. So we'll get our bearing on the key. All right, now if I come over to my project setup, we get it Shift plus S. And let's say I switch this to 48K. And let's say I don't convert the audio files to the new sample rate. It says, well, do you want to keep at their sample positions? We'll say yes. All right, so now. And let's say if I transpose it down one semitone, and we go back to the original. So if we go back kind of to the original file, we could see that it's almost a semitone, or it's a little beyond a semitone. So it's not exactly a semitone. So if you come over to the transpose and it doesn't sound like, oh, you know, that's not fixing it, and it's out of, you know, I have to tune my guitar especially for this particular song, it's probably a sample rate mismatch. So check that and see if you can go back to the original file. So let's say if I come here and let's switch it back to 44.1, hit OK. It says you want to keep the audio events. We'll say yes. This is our original. So a lot of times when I get that question, it's going to be, it's like, it's kind of like a semitone off. And there's a famous video of Van Halen doing, I think, the incarnation with Wolfgang Van Halen playing bass, where the keyboard, and I think they were doing Jump, and the keyboard was like really out of tune with the rest of the band. And they're like, why can't the band just like, you know, play in the key of the keyboard, which is probably on a backing track? And it was because it was the wrong sample rates. And if they tuned up a half step or tuned down a half step, it would still be out of key. So make sure it's not a sample rate mismatch. And you could check just by going into the pool. You can see what the original sample rate of the file is, and check that in relation to the project, Michael. And it's probably going to be a sample rate mismatch, would be my guess. All right, Michael Teams is passing on some medicinal ice cream for Uno Momento's fever. That's very generous and kind of you, Michael. All right, so we see from Beverly Beatty says, "Sweet wampum, Greg. That's pretty awesome. Thank you. Dig it." Yeah. All right. So we see Fly V's got the macro fixed. It says, "I know how to abide that macro, Greg. Thanks." All right. So we have a question. What's the difference between equal power and minus 3 dB pan laws? Okay. All right, so I think I have a project that might show this. So Okay, so let's say we have a stereo and a mono track here. Okay, so let's say we look at our pan law. So let's say we have it on a mono track, and I'll just do this so it's not super annoying. All right, so let's watch when we go to our mix console. Let's say our test tone generator, we're at minus 12 dB. Okay, so when we look at our mixer, we can see that we're at minus 12. So I'm going to pan. If we look at our mono track, we can see that, since it's a mono track, that we could pan, and as we do this, it doesn't really lose. We can see kind of the direct correlation here in the meters as we do that. Now, depending on our stereo pan law, when we're adding two sources, so let's say we're doubling a sound. When we double a sound, it increases in volume by 3 dB. So if we come here to our project setup, and let's adjust our pan law, and let's say we make it equal power. So now when I go to the stereo track, and I adjust the pan, we can see that it's going to behave very similar to our mono track. But if we have double the sources, we would have a 3 dB difference. So let's say we switch it to minus 3 dB. And now as I adjust the pan on the track, we can see that as we do this, that we could actually, what it's going to be doing as we pan, and let me just switch this over to our combined panner. So we can see that that track gets louder when we go to, if we watch our meters here, when we go to the center, we can see that it's going to increase in volume by 3 dB when we go to the sides. So what this track is actually doing, I believe, is, and let's do it at 6 dB. All right, so we come over here. Let's get to our project setup. And we'll say, let's do minus 6 dB. So let's come over here and pan. All right, so we see that increase in the volume as we do this. So when we have it on 0 dB, let's come over. So it's just going to allow you to attenuate the different volumes. So a lot of times people will use pan laws so that, as you pan and you're losing one channel, instead of the volume going down on a particular track, you could just simply have the volume at kind of a higher level so that when you pan from left to right and through the center, that the levels don't increase. So sometimes people would use pan laws to get a wider sounding mix. So a lot of people thought, in the old days of kind of studio lore, that the SSLs had like this great wide sound, and that was because they had a different pan law of minus 4.5 dB. So you can manipulate the pan law so that when you're kind of panning elements to the side, instead of them kind of dropping in volume as you kind of navigate through the panning spectrum, that the volume could actually be louder or doesn't drop when you're adding two sources or putting two sources in the middle, so you don't have that attenuation when combining two sources in a stereo track. All right, so we have a question. Hello, I know Studio One has a tuner plugin to turn the 808. Do we have the same option with Cubase? So let's say if we have like an 808 drum sample, So let's say if I come, let me just add a drum track. So we have a couple ways of doing this. So let's say, okay, I'm going to add, let's say we want to do kind of like an 808. Let me adjust my octave. Okay. Just all right, so let's say if I'm here and we could adjust kind of, let's say, our tuning. All right, so once I'm here on a particular drum, you know, if we go to like, let's say to the instrument, all right, so let's say I have like a C1 note here. All right, I'll just come into my editor. And let me just tune quickly the, let's say I want to figure out what the pitch is. So one, we could actually see the pitch here in the drums. So let's say I want it to be G0 because my song is in the key of G. So we could set that by the tuning right there. So we go back, let's say, to our editor. And if we drag, let's say we'll come here. Let's go to like our drum editor, and I have this, and I could now just drag that over. So we have, let's say, our kick here. And I could extend this over. Okay, and another way that we could do it is, so let's say I'm going to see if we could just render this in place. I may have to export audio mix down. All right, so we have our sample here. So if I go into, if I want to see what the pitch is of this particular sample, I could go into Vary Audio, and it's showing us that it's a G0 note. I could also take this and let's add an instrument track. Let's say to Groove Agent SE. So let's say I don't know what the pitch is of my drum, so I could do it in Vary Audio. I could also just drag this to a pad. So let's say I have that sample, right? But let's say, oh, I don't know what the pitch is. You could actually just come right here and it will actually show you the pitch as well here if you click on the tuning fork. So you can say, okay, I want this to be on a G1. Now when I go to my pitch tab, I can say, okay, we want a key range from G1. And let's say I want it to be going down to C1 through G2. So now I could just play this particular sample that I didn't know what the pitch was. And now it's going to be pitched musically to the particular event. So if you're generating the sound from the drum machine, you can come over here, and as you do it, as you adjust the tuning, you can set the pitch. We can render that. We could look at the pitch using Vary Audio to determine the pitch, or if we drag and drop it into Groove Agent SE, you can just go into the main and you'll see the pitch detection here, and that could determine the pitch of the sample. And then if you go into within Groove Agent into the pitch here, you can just simply map that across different keys so you can play it chromatically as needed. So let me know if that kind of accomplishes what you want to. Okay, so you see from Bratman Studio, Greg, what is the standard sample rate to set up my output for TV or video use? 48K WAV file. So generally for video, it's going to be 48K is pretty standard. So 44.1 is going to be used for audio CDs, but if you're dealing with video, 48K is kind of the standard. And we see 14 LUFS or what? Is this the same for gaming? Usually it could depend on for streaming. You kind of want the output level ideally to be around minus 14 LUFS. Gaming doesn't really have a particular standard. There could be different standards depending on what the audio director wants to do for the game. For broadcast use, if you're doing post-production for film, usually the standard for the loudness of the mix is going to be minus 23 LUFS. So for like audio, like for music streaming, a good rule of thumb is going to be minus 14 LUFS. For broadcast and post-production, usually you want to aim for minus 23 LUFS. Okay, so we see from Bratman Studio, it says, Greg, when you showed Michael's sample rate discrepancy, is there the possibility of, is there the possibility of tuning/detuning by cents or fractions of cents on an audio track, maybe a plugin even? Would we get aliasing problems? So yeah, you could definitely do your tuning by cents. So, and to do that, what we want to do, let's see if I still have, yeah, so let's say I want to take this project here. So we could do our transpose, and this is in semitones. So we're up 2 semitones, down 2 semitones. And then we have fine tune just to the right of it. And fine tune, this will allow us to adjust the tuning in cents. So we have 100 cents per semitone.
Ain't getting much younger, just couldn't see this one through. Tight oldies, one act plays, although while I'm thinking of you, she's
so say I come here to 0.
But she ain't you.
Let's say I go up half a semitone or 50 cents in the fine tune. And let's say I want to do 75 cents up, so 3/4 of a tone.
Remember when we talked about forever, we always said we'd be together.
And let's say we'll go back to 0. So if you need to like do finer increments of your tuning, just use your fine tune, and you could adjust your fine tune amount right here. So give that a shot. Let me know if that makes sense. And that would just do it in real time while it's playing back. All right, Liquid Blue Band asks, Greg, when I put snare and bass drum tracks into a group track, then mute the rest of the tracks, it seems it mutes the group track, or I'm not hearing the tracks in the group track, even the unmuted them. Okay, so let's just give us a try real quick. Okay. Okay, so it says when I put snare and bass drum tracks into a group, then mute the rest of the tracks, it seems it mutes the track, seems it mutes the group track, or I'm not hearing. All right, so let's say I take my kick and snare, and I'm going to route these to a group. So I'm just going to come over here and do the group track to selected tracks. Okay, so we'll say kick, snare. Okay, so we have my group track here. Okay, so let's say as we're playing, okay. Okay, so it says, so we route them into group track and mute the rest of the track. It seems it mutes the group track. All right. So I'm going to mute the rest of my drums. Let's say my toms. So my drums, let's say, it's just, so now I'm only hearing my hi-hat. So if I mute my kick and snare group, so check to see if, you're in fact, if you're routing the groups through sends, or, try just to come here and take your, because we can see that like these tracks can go, I have these going to my kick and snare. If these are going to my stereo out, and then I use a send to send to the group, then it could be going to the same place. So try just taking like your kick and snare, right clicking, go to add track and group track to selected tracks. So this takes my output here, instead of my output being to stereo out and maybe using the sends for the groups. This just takes the output directly to my kick and snare group. So as I play, so now we're only hearing my kick and snare. So when I unmute the group, the tracks that are feeding the group also get unmuted. So if I come here, I could bring in my other drums, but my kick and snare are still happening. So now we're only hearing the kick and snare. So let me know if you're routing to the groups from the output bus here, like, the output routing, or if you're routing through sends. So if you're doing through the output routing, you shouldn't have any problems with just muting the particular tracks. So let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Since he was a little closer to Alexandria yesterday, since he was in Arlington. Yeah, if you're ever in Alexandria, let me know. We can grab a coffee or something. All right. Yeah, I had to go to Georgetown today, drop off, pick up my friend's visa, so my colleagues, so I go to China on a trip on Friday. I had to go to the Chinese embassy this morning, so glad I was able to make it back in time. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official just says, how to set the mix console to be linked to my 16 faders controller to be able to control mix console 1, 2, 3, 4 to get linked individually every time using the same fader controller. All right, so let's say if I have my mix, so let's say I come over here and I have, if I understand this right, maybe we have different mixers for different scenarios. So I'm going to go to my MIDI remote here. My MIDI remote, I'm going to use like a mixer. So when I come over here, I'm going to move these particular faders. I'll just move this up here. So I'm going to move like faders 1 through 8 on my mix console. And I can see faders 1 through 8. Moving. Let me just reset my MIDI remote here real quick. Maybe on the wrong Sometimes it sees as a nano control 1. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to put this on my mixer. All right, so now when I take this up, I'm going to have my 8 channels, channels 1 through 8 control here. So we see my 8 faders. So I know you have 16. Now when I hit the bank button, I'm controlling the next 8 channels. I bank back. I'm controlling the first 8 channels. So let's say I have, I want to add a couple of effects sends. All right, let me just add like some instrument tracks in this particular project. So I want to add 9, we'll say 11 groove agent tracks. Okay, let's add a number of group tracks. So let's say 16 groups. Let's add some effects tracks. Let's add 10 effects tracks. Okay, so let's say now I go to my mix console 1. I want to see all of my tracks here. I go to mix console 2. And let's say I only want to see my group channels. Mix console 3. I only want to see effect channels. All right, and let's see mix console 4. I just want to see, let's see what else did effects. So we had groups, effects, and instruments. All right, so just make sure I have this right. So mix console 2 is groups, mix console 3 is effects, and let's do instruments on mix console 4. Okay, so I'm going to grab, let's see if we grab the faders. So if we do this, so I think what you want to do is all right, so say we go to mix console 1. All right, I'm going to bank over. All right, let's say I don't want to see my input channels. Okay, so I think, so let's say I bank over. Now I'm controlling all of my groups here. All right, so let's go to mix console 2. Let's see if it's, all right, I'll come over here. So now it's just following. So when I select a particular bank here, it's now following. So let's say, okay, I have these 8 going. I select these 2 here. And now we're controlling those particular ones. So as we click on the tracks, I come here. So now I'm controlling just my groups in that mix console. When I come to mix console 3, which is just going to be only our effects, I can click here and let me just, and then bank over. I'm controlling these. Now this is working not as a Mackie control, but as a MIDI remote device. So let's go to mix console 4. We're going to have all of our instruments. So as soon as I again come over here, bank over. So usually Mackie controls have to always work kind of in order, but I believe that Mackie controls, I haven't had one in forever. But if you're using kind of the MIDI remote and on the mixer, so when you grab like the fader, if you just kind of come over and look at the settings, you could just say you want to do like, volume for channel 1, volume for channel 2, and then as you bank over, it will automatically kind of, work sequentially for that. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. I'll leave this project open just in case we need to come back to it. Okay. So you see Beverly Beatty says that's pretty cool too. See Jazz Dude says this tune reminds me of Country Joe, rest in peace. Yeah. It's my friend Brian Claffey who took me to my first recording studio when I was a kid. Always be grateful and indebted to him letting me hang out with him and learn so much. All right, so we see from the Liquid Blue Band, says Greg, when I make a project in Cubase 15 and save, when I reopen it, it comes up in Cubase 14. Is that normal? So it's usually, if we come over here to like your Cubase project, it's probably just what the file association is set to. So if you kind of right click here, you could just choose to open with, and then you could just choose a different program. So it could be on your system that a .cpr file is defaultly opening Cubase 14 instead of Cubase 15. So just kind of right click and change the file association in your operating system so that when you open up the Cubase, when you open up a CPR file, it will open up in the version of Cubase that you expect. All right, so let's go ahead and we had a couple more questions that were mailed in. All right, so we have a question. We see per Alice Bino video today. It says, can I use the Audition tool, lower right-hand corner of media for only Steinberg VSTs, or can you use it for all your VST synths? I'm trying it with VST Spire and Vital, and can I get that Audition screen to show? However, Steinberg Salient Sonic works like a charm to Audition sounds. So generally when you come over here, there's a preset format for VST3 plugins. So when you come over to VST3 instruments and you say, okay, I just want to go to Retrolog and I want to audition different sounds, I could come over here and say, oh, I like that one. And you could actually just kind of record it and try out different, and that will automatically work. Now, a lot of third-party plugins, they can use the VST3 plugin preset architecture, but many companies choose not to. So for the companies that choose not to, you don't really have the option of previewing it from the media bay with the same convenience as you do. It's not a, like, we cut off the feature for other companies, so that, ours was more convenient. The other companies just haven't implemented that particular functionality. So I could see where some companies may want to have, like their own preset browsing that works in any host program and any plugin format that they're utilizing. But it's really just a matter of the companies just having a proprietary preset format and not utilizing kind of the standards that are available within VST. So you could reach out to your plugin company, say, hey, have you guys thought of using the VST presets because it's very convenient? It's kind of the idea, so that every preset could be browsed and navigated and loaded up from the same area, instead of having to, like, this plugin company has their presets here and a different plugin company has a completely different area for presets and preset management. So it gets to be, very inconsistent, but it's just probably those particular plugins, and many third-party plugins don't implement kind of the VST3 presets. All right, next question. Says, I'm wondering if Cubase has an auto-population button to add more chords to the chord pads. I've taken a song and imported it to Cubase, added a chord track, dragged the song into the chord track. Cubase populated the chords for the track. I then brought up the chord pads. I dragged the chords off the track down to the chord pads. It put in a total of 4 chords. Can I have more pads added for variety and clicking on the button? If so, do I have to manually add the basic chords that are missing from this A major scale, such as B, C, D, etc.? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's say I want to start off with a particular song. So we'll come over here. All right. Okay, so let's say I want to choose this project again. Not liking that project today. All right. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have a project here and I want to figure out the chords. So I'm going to come over to my instrument track. Let's add a chord track. Sorry, we don't need an instrument track for this. And I'm going to drag the project over. So, all right, so we see that we have the chords. And I think in this case, the band was tuning down a half step. So I'm going to select all the chords. And let me just select all the chords again. And we're going to transpose up. Let me just select only the chords. Okay, so we have these particular chords. Now, if we go to our chord pads, so let's say, we can come over here and say, okay, we want to take the chords that are being utilized in the song and copy them over to our chord pads. Now, if we want to get a little more, and I will just come over here, let's add some more pitches here. Okay, now if we want to say, oh, what's a good chord between, if I wanted more options for this, I can put like a little, just an unknown chord between two chords. And now when I come over here, we could say, okay, I want to go to the chord assistant. So we could say, okay, I want to utilize the previous, we could say highlight suggestions from the list tab. I want it to look at the previous chord and the next chord. And we could do this based on a cadence or common notes. And it could actually, so let's say we come here. See if I can abort this real quick. Did the wrong thing. But we could have it automatically trying to figure out 800,000 chord progressions. Not what I wanted. Let me just close this real quickly. Do this better. All right. All right, so again, I will just come here. Let's go to all right, so we go to our chord pads again. We will have these. All right, so again, if we come over here, let's say we could go to, so we could look at kind of the chords here. And one of the things we could just say is go into the chord editor. And we could say, I want to do this by a list of chords with common notes. So that could show us like related chords. We could also see this as a circle of fifths. So we say, okay, we're in, looks like D major. We could say, okay, I want this to be our circle of fifths. And let's say we are in, let's say if we switch this over to, and now we could just kind of see related chords. And as I was showing before, if you wanted to figure out like, if we have a chord before and after, we could go to the chord assistant and, all right, it's going to show, and if we have chords like that are in our project, so let's say, okay, we're at, let's say a D chord, and let's say as we're working with this, So let's say I'm going to a E minor chord. So if you have like kind of a blank chord, if you put an empty chord in, we could just say, okay, I want to take this. And when we go to the chord assistant, we could just come over here and look at a list of potential chords that we could utilize, and we could base it on common notes. We could base it on musical proximity. So you can say, okay, I want this to be, we're in a key of D, so maybe I want this, and we could just kind of come over here to, or see it as a circle of fifths. So we could just come over here, and if we put in two chords, have the chord assistant, and let's say now I want an E flat minor chord. We come over here, we could now see that that chord that was detected could automatically be added to the chord pads. So that way you could add kind of related chords that are musically related to your project and have that as more options. So try experimenting with either the circle of fifths, or if you want to see kind of a list of chords, or just going straight to the chord editor. But if you have, you could also just have two chords, put a blank chord between them. And once you have kind of the blank chord, we can come right over here and go to the chord assistant and look at it by proximity, by list, by circle of fifths. You want to look at it based on cadence and say, oh, a B minor chord would be good there. So it could give you kind of musical suggestions for your chords as well. All right, so FlyV just says, I never knew you could browse and hear instruments without loading them. All right, and so yeah, if it's in kind of the right zone media bay, that way you could quickly navigate through different instruments. So we see the liquid blue band just says that worked. And we see Jazzy says, hey, I didn't know this existed in Cubase chord pads moment. So. All right, so you see Beverly Beatty just says, just a few extra chords, Greg, not 1,000. You're awesome. So. So we see Beverly Beatty just mentions, I barely know scales. Says chord pads is the best thing since sliced bread for me. So yeah, it's really, you know, they're just really patterns. And you'll notice if you study music, you know, like Baroque composers have typical chord progressions. Jazz composers use, you know, there's definite patterns of chords that are being used as rock musicians and R&B and, you know, even classical versus Baroque, you know. So you'll just, after, if you pay attention to it a lot, you could see common chord progressions, and they're just patterns. And, you know, music is often just, you know, basically just, you know, working with patterns. All right, so we see Hoy Boy Official joining from Los Angeles. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see FlyV just says, I have a keyboard art in the media browser. To the right bottom, mine is numbers and letters. How can I change mine to one that's a piano? Okay, so let's say if we're in our VST instruments, so let's come over here. So when we select, so see if you click here, if you see numbers and letters, so this might be showing just the, like when you play the notes from your computer keyboard. But if you just kind of click here, so click on the little icon right there. And then you could switch from previewing with, from like if you just don't have a MIDI keyboard hooked up, to where now you just want to click on the actual MIDI keyboard, and you could change octaves as well. All right, Hoy Boy Official says, when working in the piano roll, often when moving a note left or right with my mouse, I end up moving it up in pitch as well by mistake. Is there a way to prevent that from happening? Yeah, so let's show you a trick. Okay, so just make this larger so we can. All right, so when we go to move a particular note, we have this concept where we could kind of restrain the direction of instruments that we move. So let's say I move this note vertically first. All right, so now when I move it, I'm going to hold down the Control or Command key. Now, because I moved it vertically first on the vertical axis, holding down the Control or Command key, I can't adjust it rhythmically. I let go of the Command key, I can place it anywhere I want, but when I hit the Control or Command key, it's going to now lock it into the same rhythmic spot. Now, this also will go for if I moved it horizontally. So let's say I moved the note horizontally and I accidentally moved it up. Now, before I release the left mouse button, hold down Control or Command, and now I can't move it up in pitch. When I release the Control or Command key, I can move it freely, but after I move it to the left first, now I can't change the pitch. So if I move it vertically, first, while holding down Control or Command, I can't adjust the time. So it's locked into its time position. Moving it horizontally, and I hold down the Control or Command key, now I can't adjust the pitch. If I release it, we can move it. So try just, as you move it, hold down the Control or Command key. And if you hold down the Alt key, you can make a copy just like that. So if you accidentally move it in pitch, because I moved it horizontally first, just hold down the Control key. Now you can't accidentally change the pitch. So try holding down the Control or Command key. Beverly BD just says she likes the 145 type instruction on the keyboard and the scale. Easiest for me. We see Beverly BD has to take off. Thanks for joining us today. See, Fly-V says, and I never knew you could add MIDI files from test instruments, sound with it. Yeah, so lots of great stuff you could do. All right, so we see from Hoy Boy Official, just says thanks for the help. All right, we'll see. I think we are out of questions that were mailed in. Let me make sure I got to all those. Yeah, we did. See if we have more questions. We know there's a lot of people probably are off for time zones change, but we'll see if there's other questions that come in. Give it a minute or two. Thanks for all the questions. Hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. just a quick note. I think I'll be missing a couple of live streams, like the March 20th through the 27th. I'm going to be on vacation, so we'll have 3 live streams. I think on March 20th, the 24th, and 27th that I'll be missing because I'll be on vacation. And the 20th through the 27th, I'm going to be on vacation, and we'll have our last live stream of the month on March 31st, Tuesday, March 31st. So just want to give everyone a quick heads up with that. We'll be away for about a week out of the country. And then we should be kicking back up in April for a full round of live streams in April. All right, let's see if there's other questions that come in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. All right, so we see from Vince says, thanks, Greg. I found it. My button was small in octaves. Nice. All right, so we see from Tim K, says, have a fantastic vacation. So yeah, looking forward to spring break with my wife and son. Should be a nice change of pace. But we'll have our normal live streams Friday and 1 week from today. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Rogers says, Hip Hop says, thanks, Greg. You gave me some new chord track ideas. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun to play around with. You could expand your kind of musical vocabulary, your harmonic vocabulary. All right, so we see from Tim K, says, thanks for another great live stream. Always learn or relearn some really cool things. Great community. Yeah, I feel fortunate to be able to be a part of the community. All right, well, it looks like we are out of questions. I'll wait like maybe another 10, 15 seconds, see if anything else kind of sneaks in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. I hope, again, that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So also check out, if you're a Dorco user, I just see Jazz Dude just posted that he's so good that Dorco version 6.2 came out today. It's like he read my mind. He's so good. All right, well, it looks like we are all through with questions. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Again, you can send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. And wish everyone well, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.